We are started.
Thanks. Well, this is Connor Duffy, and it is April 11th at 12:01 p.m., and we will start our legislative call.
I
So,
apologize.
and before you
Yeah.
dive into everything, I've just got to say on Tuesday night I misspoke about SB 25-200. I had thought
Oh, yeah.
I was just confused. Yeah, I gave a legislative update. I was confused. I thought that had gotten out of committee on the 7th and on the floor on the 8th and passed, but it was totally me. I was just wrong.
Well,
And there were some of our constituents who are very active and awesome following that bill. And they reminded me there and then followed up later. And they just wanted to clarify that it wasn't you who told me. So I wrote them an email back yesterday as well, saying that it was just my screw up.
okay.
Not to change up the order of anything that you wanted to say, but if you could give a update on that,
Yeah.
whenever it's in your schedule. I know it was on our schedule anyway, so we'll
Yep.
go ahead with that later.
Let me, we can go ahead and just cover that one now because I think it might be in a little bit of, maybe not a holding pattern, but it wasn't one I was going to highlight today, so I'll just go ahead and do it now. So I got through the Senate, and I think that, as I recall, it was in the Senate committee. I got to refresh because this is one of those things that when you start moving fast and furiously, I lose track of. Yes. Okay. So in the Education Committee, which was the 31st, Senate Education, they voted unanimously to pass it. It could have gone on the consent calendar, but Senator Kolker asked that it not be placed on consent so that they could just, have the conversation, or he just kind of wanted to be able to talk about it. So they did that, and it went through this week. And so the 7th was the day that it received final passage in the Senate.
Okay.
And it's been, which I don't even know what day of the week was that, Tuesday, Monday?
Monday.
Monday, okay. So that one got out of the Senate on Monday and has been introduced in the House, and it's been assigned to education, but it has not been scheduled yet,
Okay.
at least according to my notes. And just so I don't know if I can share my screen with you. Am I allowed to do that?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, let me try. Okay. Are you able to see the tracker from what
Yep.
you're, okay. So, and I know this looks a little bit different. Your view is a little different because I'm the admin for it. But if you click on the build number when you look at the tracker,
Yep.
and you can scroll down, this down here will give you all the dates of when things happened. So
Okay.
that's kind of the easiest way to get a quick update of sort of like, where is it? When did it pass certain stages? So yeah, I passed second reading on the 4th. Technically, this says with amendments. I think that actually that's referring to the Senate Education Committee amendments, because those don't officially get incorporated into the bill until they pass second reading. So it's sort of like it passes with the amendments that were recommended by the committee, and that was on the 4th. Final reading was on the 7th.
So there was, but it passed the Senate there with no amendments, right?
Right. So
And
it's no amendments on the third reading.
and
And
then
then,
on the 7th, did it pass unanimously?
yeah, so that's the other thing you can
Okay.
check is just above the dates for these actions. Yeah, and technically the dates are on here too, but you can see the actual votes.
Okay.
So on the 7th, the third reading in the Senate, this gives you the full, if there'd been any no votes, you could see who voted against it. Bridges was
Okay.
gone that day. So that's a pretty like quick and easy way to just double check things if you are, if you got your laptop
Yeah,
in front of you.
I was actually looking at, I think, something else.
Oh, okay.
Um, So to follow up from last Friday's call on that, although it hadn't passed the Senate already, we talked about it. And in the House Education, um, are they going to even have testimony on that? Or are they just going to put it on the floor and vote on it?
They'll have testimony again in the House. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to unshare now. I can't even get you back to the normal size. Anyway, so yes, when it gets back over to the House, it will, and again, oh, there we go. So my screen, I get this little red button here that says add to calendar. That's how I know it's been scheduled, but you should have something over, when you are scrolling through your list, there would be
Yeah, I've
something.
got, I'm just looking at mine here right
Yeah,
now. I've got that add to calendar button
yep.
there.
So when you want to see if something has been scheduled, you can just kind of scroll through pretty quickly and see where the little red buttons pop up.
Okay.
And so if it doesn't have a red button, that means that it hasn't been scheduled yet for the hearing. But when it is, they will take testimony just like they did in the Senate. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, if you wanted to speak on it, and I'm happy to try to keep an eye out for that if you want me to let you know.
Yeah, keep an eye out on it. And this is just me kind of reading tea leaves on it. If it passed the Senate unanimously, without amendment, unless somebody has a really big bone to pick on that one, I don't see it, raising any issues.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, keep an eye on it, and if issues do arise on it,
Hmm.
yeah, for some odd reason, um, give us a call, and
Okay.
um, like I said last week, I'd be willing to whip down there and give testimony. Um, the only kind of caveat on that is um, House staff would basically just have to provide me what they want me to read, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm not gonna. I don't think I'm well versed enough to sit there and wing
Yeah.
it, right?
Just come up with it on your own.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. I can keep you posted. I think you're right. It probably won't be necessary as far as the bill's passage. Um, just to clarify, it was an amendment on the floor, but there were those amendments in committee. And the biggie was kind of the last hang up from some of the school districts, which was they didn't want to have the kindergarten readiness assessment impacted. So he took out the references to that, which I think is part of why it was then able to move so smoothly.
Okay.
So all of the language around the kindergarten readiness stays as it is in current law. And so now it's purely the dyslexia screening component.
Okay. Good.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. If it gets into trouble, let me know, and we can figure something out.
okay, sounds good. So there were not too many new bills since we spoke last, and one that I think it may have actually been introduced before we talked last week, but I just didn't catch it. In the House Bill 1300, which there have been a few education entities that have weighed in, and I think part of why I just didn't register with me was that it's a workers' comp bill. But it has to do with switching so that employees have more of a choice in the doctor selection.
Okay.
Um, Full disclosure, I am subcontracting with another lobbyist who needed help to actually support this bill. And I know
Okay.
there have been concerns on the K-12 side. Case is actually opposing it. So if it is a situation where, if you take a look at it and decide this is something that Poudre really, needs to weigh in on and oppose, let me know. And I am happy to just find another K-12 lobbyist who is also opposing this that I could just subcontract. They could also represent Poudre on this one. It wouldn't be any cost to you guys, but it would remove me from that conflict. So I'm not, ending up with people on different sides of the same bill.
Okay.
But that's, it's the kind of thing where our first effort would be and it is actually a Kathy Kipp bill on the Senate side. It hasn't gone
Okay.
through, it hasn't made it through the House yet. It's still awaiting third reading in the House. But I know, Kathy listens to school districts, which is great for us.
Yeah.
But I
And
think
but Case is opposing it.
Case is opposing it. The argument I have heard that I cannot articulate because I'm not sure that I understand it, but the argument is that it will increase costs for the employer. And one of, the rebuttals that I heard when I brought this up was, well, so, districts mostly, I think, are self-insured or part of the self-insurance pool or whatever. And the state is also, and the state doesn't, the fiscal note doesn't necessarily reflect costs to local governments or school districts, but it certainly would reflect costs to the state. And the fiscal note is zero for the bill. So if there is an increased cost for self-insured governmental entities, you think that would show up in the fiscal note, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why there's a little bit of a disconnect for me. I'm not sure I can really articulate the reason for opposition. I have heard others say we oppose it because there's going to be this increase to employers. There have also been some amendments that address some of the concerns. I'm not sure if it gets entire, and I really don't know when Case took their position. It might have been before those amendments went on. So it sort of, it limits the distance that a doctor could be from, an employee. So you're not like having to reimburse for, somebody to go across the state to see a doctor. I'm trying to think of any others that I am aware of. It's still a list of doctors, as I understand it, but it would be the employee getting to select from this list, I believe, or certified or something. They have workers' comp docs. Anyway, I am not going to be the best person to articulate the concerns from the other K-12 groups, but I wanted to just be transparent about, sort of where things stand. So
Okay.
feel free to, I didn't want to not include it on your tracker. And if you want to just, send it to anybody internally or take a look and review it, and let me know if it's something that you, like I said, want to make sure that Poudre can weigh in on. I'll make arrangements to make that happen.
Okay, and when is that one scheduled?
It hasn't, well, it has been scheduled. It just keeps getting laid over. So it was scheduled today for third reading. It was also scheduled for the last few days, and laid over again today. I think that, there's a lot of opposition, mainly like businesses and insurance companies. And, it's kind of like employers versus the mainly the supporters are like unions and worker rights groups and things like that. So but if you look through the list of entities that have weighed in, it's lengthy and there's a lot of opposition. And my guess is the sponsors are still trying to kind of see if there are amendments that need to be done before it's out of the House. And that maybe that is why it keeps getting pushed back. The other thing that is not really related to this bill, but this bill would be caught in this situation. The House has been doing the long bill all week. They actually came in last Sunday to try to clear their calendar a little bit. They are still on the floor right now doing the bipartisan bills where there's going to be less bickering. And I think that there's a sensitivity around any bill that is controversial and that will generate a big floor fight, and kind of like, when do we want to take this on? And so that might also be another reason that they haven't run it on third reading yet, is just trying to manage the clock and keep the more controversial bills aside for the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the only House bill that I added this week. And then there were 3 Senate bills. Senate Bill 276 it's a pretty broad bill that has to do with immigration and coordinating with the federal government on immigration issues. I actually found for this one that maybe the easiest explanation or summary to read was the updated fiscal note, because the bill is pretty long and dense. It's got a lot of stuff in it. There is a section within the fiscal note specific to school districts. So I'm just going to pull that part up and read it to you as soon as I can. So even the fiscal note's 12 pages. So all right, so for school districts, it says, in addition there are some liability costs if you don't comply. It's basically the enforcement component of it. Workload for school districts will minimally increase to update rules and adopt policies regarding the disclosure of information and property access for federal immigration authorities. This workload is expected to be minimal. So in the summary, just general summary of the bill, it says, bill modifies state immigration laws to apply certain requirements to political subdivisions and make changes regarding engagement with federal immigration authorities, court petitions, affidavits, and consumer protections. And then in the more in-depth summary, it starts by talking about how there are already state laws for a lot of these things about sort of not helping ICE essentially and not reporting things, in addition to what you're required to report. And that a lot of those requirements that are current for state agencies would be sort of extended to local governmental entities. So I have not had a chance to dive very deeply into this one. It was already in committee. Which day was that? Yeah, no, the 8th. Tuesday. Party line, no surprise. And
Yeah,
then
I
it
was going to
passed.
say if they're trying to avoid controversial stuff.
Yeah, this is not
the one to do it
one to
with.
do that. There are two that I have just kind of seen the titles of and thought, oh boy, these are going to be. So it's this one, and then there's another one that went through approps that the speaker had. Oh, it was earlier this week, I think. It's kind of tracking with the long bill actually, but it's not a long bill orbital, and it's basically creating authority for and I think some money also for the attorney general to file lawsuits against the federal government or the administration. I was like, oh, that's going to be a fun one to fight about. So
Yeah. So I'm just kind of looking at it right now from Colorado.gov, and a lot of, in general, our policies and procedures pretty much have this in there.
okay,
Now, obviously, it's not required by us by state law,
right,
but from all the things in there, with the exception of probably this liability component, if you're in violation, we wouldn't be in violation because our policies and procedures take care of it.
okay,
Um,
good,
However, I can't speak for the whole board or whatnot, but um, we're really trying to stay out of this, right?
yes,
Um,
totally get that. Um, I wanted to just check the board to see if the Senate they have a lengthy list of bills that are up today. And my notes I updated this morning, or yeah, it was this morning. It does not look like they've done it since it's 276, was that right? Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they've taken this one up. So it may be one of those that gets kind of pushed to the side for a few minutes just to clear out some of the other less controversial bills, because I imagine this one will take a little time when it goes to
yeah.
the floor.
Yeah, and again, we're in compliance with current law, and we're going to follow the letter of the law to a T, no matter what situation arises
Yeah.
for our buildings. And this just kind of probably codifies and penalizes a lot of the stuff we're already doing.
Okay. Well, so that's probably just kind of an FYI, and we can keep an eye on it. And if there are any changes to, things that would impact districts, I can let you know.
Yeah.
Okay. The two other Senate bills are, I don't think they will be particularly controversial. The first one is Senate Bill 278, which, as I understand it, kind of expands the definition of the EpiPens. I think the way they're designated in statute right now for purposes of like possession and administration by schools is they're like it references like auto injectors or something. And they realized that that definition wouldn't necessarily capture the nasal spray version. So they
Okay.
wanted to be able to encompass, any of this. So they've changed the term in any place it shows up in statute, but I don't think it really substantively changes, much about your operations with regard to EpiPens or the whatever the nasal spray is. It's probably not a
Yeah.
pen. Um, so that's 278. And then the other one is 284. And this one I'm just going to pull up so I've got the language in front of me, but it's basically requiring you to provide some time during the day for youth organizations to kind of make students aware of their opportunities with regards to these programs and enrichment activities. So I don't have a sense of how much additional time that would require or what kind of burden that might place on the, time constraints for something like that. It's
So
pretty
these
new.
are, is this uh pertaining to, so these are outside organizations coming to present.
Yeah. So for example, I mean, and I'm wondering if this is one of the groups that actually is behind it, but like Scouting Colorado is
Yeah.
one that's supporting it. So, groups like that. Um,
Well,
yeah.
my thing on that is, and I don't know where our district in general would stand on that. Maybe if it's something that would be obviously outside of school hours, right? Like I don't think that we're going to get on board with something that says, hey, for half a day, one day a year, all these kids are going to go to a non-for-profit trade show in the gym.
Hmm.
So it would have to be, we probably want to see it outside of hours. And then, you know, the, I don't, I haven't read through it, but I would just think that even if it's after hours, you you open it up for you have to open it up for every kind of group, right?
Yep. Yep.
And it makes no difference to me either side of whatever issue you're on. There's always going to be two opposing groups that
Hmm.
kind of show up for that, right?
Yep.
Um, so
Yes.
let's see where that goes. I get a feeling they might get a lot of pushback on that.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was looking to see there haven't been any groups that have officially registered a position yet. So I will keep an eye on that because I suspect there will be pushback because and I don't know how you define, school day necessarily, but it does say on or before January 1, 2026, each district, school, local board of education, whatever, shall adopt and implement a policy that authorizes a youth service organization to present to students on school campus during the school day about the opportunities available for extracurricular activities. So it does sort of require that you allow them this opportunity during the school day. And then you've got to have like a policy about how they notify kids and that kind of thing. And I think you're right. Like that was my read when I saw it was like, this seems like it could be a bit of a time suck for schools, like a little, disruptive. You got to take learning
Yeah.
time from somewhere to make it happen. So we can kind of keep an eye on it and see where other districts land and if the sponsors, amend it out so it's, you
And
know,
when I see it here, is this pertaining to pre and K-12, or is this just at the high school level?
let's see. I didn't see an age designation.
Yeah, because if it's I don't see it in here either.
I don't. think it specifies.
Yeah, let's monitor that one just because I
Okay.
think I, I not to be pessimistic or Debbie Downer, but I see I look at the negative of that of the different groups pitted against each other in front of
Yeah.
a bunch of second graders is not going to look good no matter anything, right?
Right. Right.
Scouting America, right? Well intentioned, but I can guarantee you there's somebody in the state that is going to come out against Scouting America, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a, I
Right?
mean, yes, I agree. I think it's the kind of thing that is well intentioned, but the implementation could present a lot more challenges than what
Yeah.
maybe the sponsors realize. So okay, fair enough. We will watch that one. So those are all the new ones that
Okay.
I had added to the tracker this week. Just a quick sort of update on where things are this morning in approps, and I need to go back. I think all of these passed, but I can double check. Senate Bill 20 in Senate approps, they had Senate Bill 27, which was the trauma informed school safety plan, which is more on the Office of School Safety than it is on districts. Senate Bill one, whoa, shoot, my tablet went to sleep. 167, which requires that the state land board funds are invested in community building,
Yeah.
community
That
investment
passed.
funds. I believe it did. I kind of glanced, oh shoot. I just glanced through the appropes this morning and it looked like almost all of them passed. Hang on. 167 passed 6-1 and 27 also passed 6-1.
Okay.
And then the immigration bill that we just talked about a few minutes ago also was in approach this morning. And that one also passed party line.
Okay.
And then in the House, they had House Bill 1274, which is the one, the healthy school meals ballot
Yeah.
measure. And that one, I believe, also passed. Let me just pull that up. 12,
Okay.
1274 passed 8-3.
Okay. Yeah.
So those were in approach this morning. On the House floor today, I almost hesitate to even read these off because they have gone totally off the rails. I'm not even sure they're doing any of these. They had 63 was the library bill that was scheduled for third reading, although I think that one might be a little bit contentious, so it may not have happened.
Okay.
The 1158 they did do because that was the one I texted you about with the amendments that Basenecker had a question about.
Yeah, I texted you back.
Yeah, you're in the
Uh,
car or something.
yeah, I was in the car and then I took a look at it and I looked at the amendments in there and the thing that I saw was kind of a minor definition change on advertisements.
Yep.
And then the second one was a carve out for agriculture.
Yeah.
All right. Um, I, I don't see us having, as a district, issues with those two amendments.
Yep.
Um, I, it's not, I'm not 100% sure, but the aggregate amount of students that could potentially be exposed to advertising in these programs is not that large. So I don't think we're really monitoring that. That's my opinion. I'm not sure. But the minor definition of advertisement change, it was palatable to me and agriculture amendment, that seems like that's somebody needs an amendment to get
Some,
it
yeah,
passed.
there was
Yeah,
some ag teacher somewhere
yeah,
decided they were worried about animal husbandry.
yeah,
Yeah, and that was kind of my read as well. I was listening to the explanation from the sponsor, and they when they talk about it, they post it on the screen. So I was reading the language in the amendment on the advertising definition, and then I was listening to how she was explaining it, or like sort of why they were running this the amendment, the purpose of it. And I'm not sure that the amendment really met what she was describing as the purpose, but the language itself in the amendment, that advertising definition seems fine and harmless as far as I can tell. I think that the intent was that the way she explained it was, we're trying to carve out the example she used was a student that might be researching something in history or older things, and they don't want to have some historical advertisement of cigarettes that
right.
would not be allowed today, but that it comes in some historic document or whatever. And I was kind of like, I'm not sure that that advertisement definition actually carves out what they're trying to carve out, but okay,
Yeah.
I also couldn't see it all that well, so I just kind of gave her the benefit of the doubt. But yeah,
Well,
my understanding is it was pretty innocuous.
yeah, and if Representative Basenecker needs input from us, I think that we would be comfortable enough if it's okay with the co-sponsor, Junie Joseph,
Mhm.
Representative Junie Joseph. If the changes are okay with her, I mean, her and Andrew are colleagues. So if
Yeah.
you want to get back, I don't know if it's passed or whatever, but if you want to get back to Andrew Basenecker and say, we're fine with it just as long as it's okay with Junie Joseph.
Yeah. I can let him know that. And yes, I mean, both of those amendments that I sent you were coming from the sponsors. So
Yeah.
I think they were friendly amendments for the bill. Um, so the others that oh my gosh, it's so funny. Like I made this list at 6 o'clock this morning, and now I'm looking at the list of things they actually did, and it's totally different. So let me look at what they actually did and see if I can be a little more accurate for you. Uh, I, those are how, okay, so second reading. We have, I think that's all of the digital materials. That's one we just talked about, 1158. Uh, Utility lodging tax. Okay, I don't see any other K-12 bills on their current list for consideration on the House floor. Senate floor, oh my gosh, thank goodness is done. So they're not still a moving target at least. So their list as of 6 this morning was House Bill 1248, which was one of the two seclusion bills.
Yep.
And that one, let's see, did they do it? I do not see that one. Oh, they did do it. Yes, the committee report was adopted and the bill passed. So that one passed on second reading, so no recorded vote. The main time suck for them today was they went through, readopted all of the long bill, orbital bills and the long bill itself. So
Yeah,
that whole,
was
yeah.
there issues with that popped up kind of late Wednesday night?
Um, No, I mean, no, as far as like overall passage, let's see, Wednesday night would have been second reading. So this was in the House, so second chamber.
Yeah.
They did the orbital bills and the long bill itself, second reading on Wednesday, some various amendments. I mean, it's such a weird exercise because they go through this whole thing, each chamber adopts a bunch of amendments, and then they all end up stripping it's like anything that got adopted in the first chamber gets
Yeah.
stripped off in the first committee of the second chamber, and then anything adopted in the second chamber gets stripped off when it bounces back for reconsideration in the first chamber. So basically, all the original bills that were first introduced are now back in the hands of the conference committee, which is the JBC,
Yeah.
to decide all
Figure it
over
out.
again. Yeah. So it's that's basically where they are, is the sort of standard practice goes back to conference committee. They get permission to go beyond the scope, so they can just kind of look at everything and take anything into consideration. And so that's the Senate finished that process and sent it back to the JBC, so that they will now start up the conference committee process
Okay.
probably later today. So that was really kind of the main order of business for the Senate today. They went through all the orbital bills and repassed them sent them to the conference committee. And then there were a few, let me just see if there are any other K-12 bills on the Senate. Mining, Tony Graham says. Nope, just
Go
this.
keep talking, and I gotta grab my power cord here real quick.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Just looking through the consent calendar too. Okay, I am not seeing anything other than, yep, the only K-12 that I see is that seclusion bill on seconds. So
Okay.
the Senate is almost, I think looks like they're done for the day. So they're gone for the weekend. So that is sort of where things are today, and kind of what has happened recently. The school finance bill got out of committee Monday. Yeah, it was Monday. I think the main points that they're still kind of hammering out, there was a notification that went out to school districts from CDE talking about grants and rolling forward grant money. And it sounds like the chair of House Education, also the bill sponsor of one of the sponsors of the School Finance Act, is willing to address that in the school finance bill to say that you're not going to be cut off for rolling your funds forward. You can still, any unspent money from a grant can still roll forward. So that was my understanding as of this morning, they would address that. And then I think Case has talked about wanting some sort of, for lack of a better term, a BS factor, some way to account for sort of where we would be versus where we are in any given year. And I'm not entirely clear on the would be, what they're sort of tacking that to. Is it like, what they have talked about in a lot of the negotiations leading up to the current school finance bill 1320 is, well, current law 1448 that passed last year pumped a whole bunch of new money into K-12 that would have gone into place this year. We never actually got that money because it hadn't actually gone into place, and that's what we're doing now. And this year's bill is dialing that back a little bit because we don't have money. But some folks say, well, we want to keep track of what we were supposed to have under 1448.
Right.
Which is one way to account. I also kind of feel like, districts never really had that money. So it's weird to say like, oh, we had this money and we lost it. Like on paper, you lost it. So you could also tack that sort of like where we should be or where we are to, what's your actual this year, and do you go up or down year over year compared to your actuals this year? So I think some of those details about like sort of how you define that BS factor and how you calculate the where we should be number. Yeah. It's a bit of a placeholder. It is almost, in my mind, entirely for like political purposes of going to the Capitol and explaining why you need more money. I don't feel like that is really, we don't have a problem with making the case for why we need more money with or without some sort of actual dollar amount to say, oh, we should have had this much, or we're down this far from where we should have been.
Right.
we can point to all kinds of unmet needs for why we need more money.
Yeah.
That's like why we have the adequacy study and, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I think that that is still being negotiated. That's something that I think Case may still be pushing on. There are others who I think are still in an amend position that I'm not entirely clear on why. Adams 12, I think is, but for the most part, it's currently scheduled for appropriations Tuesday morning. And my guess is they will take it to the floor. Probably not later on Tuesday, but maybe Wednesday,
Okay.
probably within a couple of days at least of approps. And then I would guess final passage in the House by the end of next week. So probably week after next, we'd be looking at in the Senate,
Yeah.
the hearing over there. So,
Yeah,
but
we
I
had a
do,
detailed review of the runs and student
yeah,
counts and stuff like that. Uh, Kind of how we build our budget up from what comes out
yeah,
of Denver. We did that on kind of, well, not too late on Tuesday night. And from all the conversations I've had with everybody, we will be, especially for this year, um, you know, kind of funded at the same level and kind of that live to fight another day.
yeah,
I think that there's a lot of people, saying, well, we we love what happened this year, but we're going to have to do the exact same exercise next year, and each additional year it gets a little bit harder.
mhm.
So we'll see. Um,
Yeah. Uh, I mean, I think that what we will need to keep an eye on, what is kind of saving us this year, is the hold harmless provision that the speaker put in place to really keep districts flat, year over year and not tying this hold harmless to some other number. Um, but also, that removed a slight percentage increase that had been in place in 1448. And
yeah.
so, like maybe trying to get that back or making sure that, because I think that's limited as far as the hold harmless. I think it's only for a couple of years. So I think just keeping an eye on that moving forward in the future is what we need to be doing. And, hopefully someday we'll have more money. We can actually bump people up. Who
Yeah,
knows when that'll happen?
I'm I'm actually somewhat probably more optimistic about that than others. Um, However, you know, we'll see what tax receipts look like this time next
Yeah,
year too.
right.
We have a tendency to always factor in that it increases, and we got the original budget stabilization factor because of a massive decrease before. So
Mhm.
that's not out of the realm of possibility. Now I'm
Yep.
optimistic that that's not going to happen, but it's there, and I am pleasantly surprised where we ended up,
Good.
because if you were to have asked me, and knock on wood, if you were to have asked me kind of November timeframe, I I was a betting man saying the budget stabilization factor might have came back this year.
Yeah.
Um,
The amount of money that they came up with for K-12 really did kind of shock me,
yeah,
given what they were doing to every other department and every budget and, on the state books. The fact that K-12 came out overall, in the state total program share investment, it was much bigger than I was
yeah.
expecting to. Yeah. Um,
Well, before we hop off here, I see that other people had hopped on the call, and I just want to give a quick recap again on SB 200. So again, I apologize for misspeaking the other night. I don't know what I was looking at. It's just out of right field. Um, we're now, and confirm if I'm wrong. We're now we have been, but we're now officially in the support position.
mhm. Let me
The
just confirm that
bill
while we're.
is has been introduced in the House, but it doesn't look like it's been scheduled yet. And if there's any kind of new amendments or something that puts the bill in jeopardy from passing, Ann is going to give myself and Kristen a call, and we'll see if we need to testify in support on the bill. And then, correct me if you're wrong, my opinion on it is that because it passed the Senate with no amendments and unanimously, I'm not anticipating any major changes to the bill in the House.
Not that I'm aware of. I think that's accurate. It should pass pretty well.
Yeah. One other thing on there from the sponsor, Coker, when he spoke on it on the Senate floor, did he mention the funding mechanism in there? Because I know when we spoke on this, it was either last week or the week before, we had ascertained that it was the funding mechanism for it was already in place by the Read Act, but there was some confusion on exactly what was in there. Did the sponsor have to clarify that at all?
I don't recall that specifically. I know I have heard, I don't think it was his comments on the floor, but that there were that was part of what originally had been the motivation for sort of rolling back some of the kindergarten readiness assessment requirements was to sort of make up for some of the costs associated or something. And I don't think they ever landed. Well, actually, no. There were some high school assessments that people were suggesting could be, it was, I should go back and just look at what, or talk to somebody who's been in these conversations, because I feel like what I was hearing was, well, maybe we could make some of the, like the social studies, or not the, state mandated assessments, but some that have a little more flexibility, do them on like a change up the rotation, like if it's every 3 years, make it every 4, something like that, to claim a little bit of a savings that could then be applied to this, something like that.
Okay.
So I'll try to get more detail on that. I don't think it was anything that was covered on the floor. Those are all kind of, back channel conversations that I've had with individuals.
Yeah, I was wondering on that, if that in the House committee, if that comes up, something like that, then that's something that I obviously I'd have to get up to speed on it. But if they need, if there's a dust up over that, then that's something that I think that we could probably help out on.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the only thing. That was the only thing on there, and hopefully it passes with a whimper and not a scream. I think it should, because that's kind of how it was in the Senate. And for those on the call, again, I apologize for misspeaking on Tuesday night, and we will continue to track this bill.
Yep.
And do you have anything else that you got for us?
That's everything on my list.
Okay. Well, keep me in the loop on that stuff. Myself and Kristen and anybody else in the district's willing to help as we come to the finish line.
Yes. 20-something days left.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time, everybody. Thanks for joining the call, and we'll talk next week.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.